Welcome to the Bible Savvy Podcast, a weekly conversation about how to understand, enjoy, and apply God's Word. It's time to jump into a new passage from the Bible Savvy reading plan.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm here with Pastor Courtney and Pastor David, and I feel like I'm supposed to greet you guys. We don't know if you are Savvies, Savians, or just the Bible Savvy Nation, but we are still working on a name for the fandom for this podcast. So if you got ideas, you can send it in. So we'll figure it out. David, do you have a question for us?
I have a question. We've had some, let's call them spirited debates about food on this podcast.
Yeah, well, yes,
And
sure.
I figured let's
Stale
lean
academic.
in. Let's keep it going, right?
Let's do it.
Question for today is, what's a food that you actively avoid?
If I said potatoes, what would happen right now?
Well, we'd say which potato, and then we'd make you defend your
It'd be a
answer, and
whole
then,
nother
and
podcast.
everyone would be rolling their eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have an answer?
Food I actively avoid. I mean, I would take this as one that I might pick out of things,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
Because you can actively avoid, like, I don't choose to order octopus on a menu because that is kind of gross to me.
But
I know some people would say it was delicious.
But if someone gave it to you, would you be like, "Oh, this is going to be hard"? Like, I'm
I
going
mean,
to
it'd be
avoid.
hard
just
to
can't eat
choke
it.
down, but I'm not rude. Like, let's be,
Wow.
So what would you be rude about? That's the
real
question.
Let-
Someone from the church invites you to their house and feeds
let's
you.
try a few things.
Where does Courtney lose her pastoral
I feel like
license
people
because
are-
she
yeah,
didn't need it?
right? I'm like, ooh, because again, like I have not been on Go teams where I've had to avoid food, but I know some people.
Some people have been in
Go
challenging
teams,
situations,
They've been in
yep.
challenging situations, but on a regular basis, a food that I try to avoid. I am not a big raw onion girl.
Oh, I can.
So
I
like
can
if
support
there's
that.
a raw onion
Yes.
in a sandwich, or like sometimes they'll put it in the sandwich if you're like at an event or something, it's been sitting there and the raw onion is now soaked into the bread.
Oh no.
That's like
No,
that
I don't like
sandwich
that.
is not
Yeah.
coming near me.
No.
And like in salads or things like that, like I will kind of pick through to not eat the raw
Yeah,
onion.
I'm
Yeah.
with you 100% on this.
Just choose to avoid a raw onion.
That was my number 2 answer for today.
Is onions?
It
Okay,
was-
what's your
it
number
was,
one?
It was raw onions. Like,
onions is a different story.
literally, as a kid, I loved Taco Bell, and I'd get a bean burrito with no onions, and every once in a while they'd forget and they'd leave the onions in, and it was inedible.
No.
Like I would throw it out. Like,
Well, it
this
adds a
is-
different flavor
you can't
and a
pick it
different
out.
texture.
Yeah,
Both,
Oh.
both. But it changes
Yes,
it too much.
Yeah.
no. My actual answer is pickles.
No. Oh, that's my
hate
answer.
pickles.
Really?
That is my
We
answer.
agree?
We agree.
Oh my gosh!
We do not agree.
Oh my gosh.
I-
no.
First.
What's your thing on
I can
pickles?
eat
Okay.
a jar of them.
Pickles,
Oh, no.
no. Pickles, they smell terrible.
Yes.
They look
Wrong.
terrible.
You're right.
Wrong.
They ruin everything it touches.
Amen.
Wrong.
It is straight from the pit of hell.
That's right.
I am convinced.
That is right. Cucumber soaked in evil. I have met the devil, and he smells like pickles. No way. I love Chick-fil-A. I know we have some Chick-fil-A folks here,
course.
but it is the one
Ugh.
unforgivable thing.
Yes.
Why would you do that? I'm glad they ask now if you want the pickle on there.
They should.
But really, it's like a sneak attack. Like, look, we're God's company and Satan. You know, like it's just.
No.
It's what are
for
we
the
doing?
record, I do not agree about pickles.
Oh.
Pickles, we can agree on onions. Pickles, I love pickles.
Oh,
I
no.
eat like jars of pickles. I will eat the whole jar
Oh no.
of
No.
a pickle.
and at Chick-fil-A, when the pickle like soaks into the bread,
That's right.
it ruins the whole sandwich.
The
You
whole
can't
thing.
eat it. You can't eat it.
No, it's no
You
good.
can taste the pickle in it.
I buy the dill pickle seasoning and put it on my French fries and my chicken tenders.
and this is
Not
gonna, this
okay.
is going to offend some people, but this is why when I moved to Chicago, I really struggle with the whole Chicago dog concept because it's very pickle based.
It is very pickle
And I'm like,
There's
I'm
as much
sorry.
pickle as
Give
there is
me,
dog.
give me the ketchup and the mustard, and I will offend you. I'm not putting pickle on my hot dog. I'm sorry.
So you weren't into like there was a pickle witch for a while there.
Oh,
A pickle
what?
witch?
There
Yeah, of
was.
course.
There was a
Yeah.
sandwich shop. I won't name it because they don't,
Yeah,
they're
a
not
pickle
paying
witch.
us right
It's
now.
like a servant of the devil, right? A witch.
There you go.
And she has
There it is.
pickles.
Yep.
She knows what she's
Yep,
doing.
That's it.
Corrupting our
And
youth.
I consumed them. So
Oh.
thanks for.
I was gonna say pickles.
That's amazing.
I will add this one. I know it's a hot take. Ketchup. I hate ketchup, and I don't know why. Everything I love is supposed to go with ketchup.
I've never
It
met
does not
someone
make
who
any
doesn't like
sense to me.
ketchup.
But it is one where I used to be a very picky kid and didn't like a lot of things. But I now eat lots and lots of things. I'm pretty well rounded. But for some reason, the thing that everybody uses to make other things they can't handle taste better.
Yeah.
I can't do
ironic.
it. I don't know why. It's like,
Okay.
no.
It also has vinegar. Like maybe it's a vinegar issue.
Yes, vinegar is, you're right.
It's a vinegar.
Okay.
So it's funny because I like spicy salsa. I love spicy salsa, but I don't like many hot sauces because a lot of them are very vinegary. So, yeah.
See, I've met people who don't like mayo or mustard, and that makes a little bit more sense to me.
I'm not into either of those either.
Yeah, all right. So you're just like a... So,
But
so when you get a hot dog, what do you do with your hot dog?
I can eat a sandwich with mayo on it. But if I get a burger, which I love burgers, that has ketchup on it, I will pass.
Okay.
I will take a bite and be like, oh gosh, I shouldn't have done that.
But if you get invited to a cookout and you get handed a hot dog and you're not putting a pickle on it and you're not doing ketchup or mustard, like what goes on your hot dog?
Nothing.
Oh my gosh, just a plain hot dog.
It's just the Vienna beef right there. Why adulterate it with anything else?
All right.
Whoa.
Learning so
There you
much
go.
today.
Why don't we get into our passage?
Let's do it.
I feel like we should.
So before we jump in, I do want to say this. This is the last podcast episode on the book of Exodus. Mm-hmm. And so we have been, from the beginning of the book of Exodus, talking about how you can get a copy of Carmen Imes, a copy of her books. We did an interview with her about the book of Exodus. If you haven't seen it yet, please go watch it and leave a comment on the video. If you leave a comment on the video, that will get you entered into the drawing that we're going to do when we are done with the book of Exodus. So at the end of this week, we're going to look at the names that are on there, who's commented, and we are going to pick a couple of people to win some books. So if you'd like that, please go check out that video and the other things on Exodus as well.
And while you're on there, because we're on the new YouTube channel for Bible Savvy, it would really help us out if you hit that subscribe button. If you like the video, you leave a comment. It always just helps us kind of extend what we're
makes it easier for people to find.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we are going to be in Exodus chapter 33. Let me give you a little bit of context here. It's important to remember that the people are at Mount Sinai. Okay. They've been at Mount Sinai since chapter 18 or 19. And Moses has been facilitating this meeting between God and the people. And they have already formed a covenant with God. So they have said, all right, here's what it's going to look like for you to be our God, us to be your people. And they have said, we're in. Okay. After that, immediately after making those vows, Moses goes up on the mountain, and while Moses is on the mountain, the people say, oh no, we've lost Moses. What are we going to do? And they make a golden calf and start worshiping it. So this is equivalent to, it's your honeymoon, and you invite some random stranger that you just met on your honeymoon to come and have an affair. So this is very much a serious problem. And God sees it as such. And he says, look, if you have just made these vows to me and you immediately broke those vows within days of this happening, this is not going to work. And so he says, all right, I'm still going to keep my promise to you to give you a land, but I'm going to send you off. You can go do that, but I am not coming with you. Okay. This whole thing about us being together, it's not going to happen. This is obviously a tragedy. Okay. They've dealt with the kind of offenses and so on, but God says, look, this is not happening. And so Moses goes before God and says, wait a minute. This is not okay. And so we're going to read that story here. We're going to start in verse 12 and go through verse 23.
Moses said to the Lord, you have been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You have said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways, so that I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people. The Lord replied, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. Then Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? And the Lord said to Moses, I will do the very thing you have asked, because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But, he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then the Lord said, there is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen.
All right, so let's talk about the O in comma, which is observations. And just as a little bit of a review, this is probably a good passage to talk about this. We generally look for four things. Treats, T-R-T-S. So the first T stands for...
Themes about God?
Truths about God.
Truths
about God. The R is for
Repeated words.
words. And the other T is themes. Okay, so that's we got those together.
I'm so sorry.
And the S is
something striking.
Something striking. Yes. Okay. So those are always good to look for. I think we've got good examples of all of those in this passage. So what do you guys see?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has to be one of the most unique and coolest passages in all of Scripture. I feel like, like before diving into each word, there's a general observation of, like, whoa, I need to take a moment, absorb this. It's like you get to the end of a great movie and the credits roll, and you just sit there and you're like, hold on, I need to take a moment. That's what this passage feels like to me. Just the power behind it. Themes about God. I would say God's glory is both impressive and awe-inspiring, and I mean awe in like the literal sense of the word. Because if you're not reading this passage on the edge of your seat, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And God seems to be giving Moses so much favor. When is Moses going to get what he asked for? Gosh, it's just it's a very gripping and emotionally charged passage. It feels like.
Yeah. I feel like there's an emotion. I mean, I was saying before the podcast, this is one of probably 3 passages in Scripture that I generally don't make it through without crying. Like I have had to practice to be able to read just now, and that moment when Moses says, "Now show me your glory." Usually, I am just a puddle, so I was doing well today. But it's such a familiar place to be. To have Moses saying to the Lord, you've been telling me lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you'll send with me. How many times have I been in one of those situations where I'm like, okay, God, like, this is what I thought was going to happen. And now that's not happening. And then his one request, Moses says, now show me your glory. What a simple request. And there's so many truths about God in there, right? Just that face to face. Just before that, I think, is where it talks about like Moses talking to God face to face. And yet then later he says, you can't see my face.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The wrestling here, there's a part of me that completely relates and a part of me that is trying to figure it out. When he's saying, okay, look, you sent me to do this and you found favor with me. You said you're pleased with me. And like the repeated word of you found favor, pleased, that kind of stuff keeps coming up. And so there's a part where like Moses has gotten to this place of like, okay, we got to the mountain. Like you said, like I confronted Pharaoh. We got to the mountain. Like Moses was super insecure about all this happening. And now we got here. We did the covenant thing and you were going to move in. And now, that's not happening. Whoa, what's happening? How is this going to work? Like that's the very relatable part. There is a certain amount of this that I'm just like, wow, it's bold, Moses, to be like, I know you're pleased with me.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm too insecure of a person or too, I'm the good kid that I'm sure I didn't do good enough. But like he's just like, no, I know you're pleased with me and you found favor with me. But how's anybody going to know?
Right.
Like if you're not there, be like, God's super into me.
God's super. He's manifesting it though, because he says that.
Oh God.
And then the Lord says to Moses in verse 17, I will do the very thing you've asked because I am pleased with you and I know you by name. He's repeating exactly what Moses just said. Oh my gosh.
All right, for the record, manifesting.
Yes, no.
Nonsense.
No, yes, no, that's.
If there's anything that's BS on this Bible Savvy podcast, that was. No, so
Moses is not manifesting.
So here's what Moses is doing. he's going directly to God and saying,
Yeah.
this is what I want and need and long
Yeah.
for.
Yep.
And that, like, so that's where the idea of manifesting, wishful thinking,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Those kinds of things. People want to say, is there a way for me to get what I want or need?
Yeah.
And is there a way to have some control over it? You know what I mean? That there's some like trick to getting it right. And if I have the right thoughts, I put it out there in the universe, I'm going to get it. The appeal of that is actually from this insecurity of saying, I don't know how to get what I need. And the model that's actually here is, well, it's actually relational. That what you need to do is talk to God. And knowing that you're not in control, knowing that he actually could say no, there is no reason he has to do this for him. To say to God, here's what I need, and out of God's goodness and grace, to actually receive something you don't deserve. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
good.
like I know I'm making the joke about it, but I encounter people who are like, oh, I'm just going to put it out there.
No.
And you're like, well, no. You got to wrestle with God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, he has evidence of that, right?
He
Like
does.
it's not that is said in jest. Please no, I'm not saying you should manifest things, but it is he has the experience, right? Like you have said these things, like I know these things, and then God reinforces those things. Like God is a God who remembers. He goes back and says those things again, right? My presence will go with you. I will give you rest. Here's Moses. Words. And here's God. My presence will go with you.
Yeah.
And I will give you rest. Words. And he's like, I will do the thing you've asked. I'm pleased with you. You know, there's this like Moses filling the space and God going, let me just fill the space.
Yeah. Well, and when you've got Moses who in chapter 3 and 4 first is called and is like, I got all the reasons this won't work. And like I think his first question is, who am I that I should go and do this?
Yep.
And God doesn't actually say anything about Moses. He says, I'll be with you.
Yeah.
And so if Moses has learned the lesson that he needed so desperately at the very beginning, okay, there's a whole lot of water now beyond under this bridge, and it all happened because God was with me, and now he's not. Okay, suddenly the game's changed, and so you can understand why he'd say, but this was kind of the deal.
Yep.
You said you'd be with me.
Yep. But also, because I wrote down that too, like Exodus 3, it reminded me of that moment. And Lord says, I'll be with you. And that should have been enough for Moses, but eventually he does ask, he's like, but like, is there somebody else too? Like, you know, like that's great. But, and finally God's like, all right, fine. Like Aaron's going to go with you and it's going to be this thing. This time Moses doesn't need, he doesn't need like, oh, Aaron's going, he's like, no, I need your presence. Like, that's it. Like, that's all I need. So there is a little like spiritual formation here happening.
Yes.
I think.
Oh, for sure. Well, I think a repeating word, phrase that's also a theme, right, is the idea of your name, right? You have said, I know you by name, and the Lord repeats it, I know you by name. And then the Lord says, I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. And again, going back to that Exodus 3, that first encounter at the burning bush, it's tell me your name. And the Lord says, I am who I am. I mean, this is that same kind of powerful use of the name.
Verse 15, when Moses said, if your presence does not go with us, don't send us. Yeah. Like that struck out, that was striking to me because that's very bold of him to say. He's basically saying, I would rather die in the desert with you than go to the promised land without you. Yeah. Which was, I felt like most people would be like, well, all right, well, the promised land flowing with milk and honey, is still there. Milk and honey is gonna be great. Yeah, like God, I hope you join later. But he said no. I would rather literally die in the desert than go to this place of blessing without God. And I'm like, how many of us actually do that? Like say, like, hey God, like I'm gonna do X, Y, or Z. Will you bless it? And instead of saying like, hey, if you don't go with us, we're not doing this, right?
Yeah. The reason he gives at the end of verse 16 is interesting. What else would distinguish me and your people from all other people on the face of the earth? Like if you're not with us, there isn't much that makes them different, right? Like it's this unique people called by God, but if they just go and function without the presence of God, well, people come by, they're like, well, you don't seem that different from the Hittites over here and the Egyptians and the Babylonians. Like everybody's kind of trying to do their thing with their God kind of somewhere. Like what's different? And the very distinguishing thing is God has a house down the street. Yep. Right? Like the part of what they've already talked about, like you're going to build a tabernacle right? And they'll eventually go do it. But this is like the thing. Well, maybe it's not worth building the house because you're not moving in. You know what I mean? But to say like, no, he actually lives with us. He is actually present is the thing. This ordinary group of people, this makes them distinct out of everybody else.
Yeah.
One of the striking things for me in this passage is in verse 19 when he says, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you. It's a lot of goodness.
It's a lot of goodness.
It's a lot of goodness. Like, what does that even look like? How do you even, again, what does that even feel like?
Yeah.
All of God's goodness passes in front of you.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about the actual like phenomenon of what's going on. Because this is the part where I'm like, I think you're talking in abstract concepts, right? Like, so if you talk about the goodness of God, I kind of think of it as like an idea that's out there. It's like a quality of his personality kind of thing. But like, there's some physical activity that's happening here, and you're like, what was the actual experience? Like, he's literally going in a little, rock, crack in the rock kind of thing, and some phenomenon that is God's presence is going, like, there is a certain amount of, I struggle with the imagination. I don't know if there's a resolution to this, but I'm wondering what you guys think about this. Like, I can't help but just imagine it's like a very bright light passes by, like what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the pictures that I've had of this is like the idea of, almost like, and again, this is just my imagination, but the idea of like the images of all of God's goodness, like Moses has experienced a lot of goodness of God. Is it almost like that, like here's all the images of God's goodness,
montage,
right? Like this montage of images. And like, I've always pictured it as this big, like emotional, like whoosh kind of moment, right? Because we have times in scripture where it's like a rushing wind, or this gentle whisper, things like that. So is it like this whole, like, just this idea that Moses has this experience with all of God's good, just a reminder of all of his goodness. And then I'll proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. Like, what does that even sound like?
Yeah.
Like, ooh, that's incredible. Yeah. And then the beauty of it, again, why this brings me to tears, just even the thought that when my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock and cover you with my hand.
Yeah.
Like, what incredible care. Like, just like set you in and cover you up. And it gives such like human qualities to God.
Yes.
In this moment. And this is, again, it's a passage that just blows my mind.
It definitely made me think of Elijah's moment on, it's the same mountain.
Same mountain
later on when Elijah is running from Jezebel and kind of having a pity party and God says, go to the edge and I'm going to come by, and there are these big loud moments and big windstorms and thunderous whatever, and God's not in any of them, and then it just says in a still small whisper, like God's presence was there. And so I literally kind of, in my head, I started thinking, well, maybe that's the simplicity of God's glory in this moment is the same thing. It's just like a still small whisper. I mean, they saw the fire, as it led the Israelites away from Egypt, and they saw the cloud, they saw those big moments, and then, but there's this goodness too. Yeah. And I don't know.
It is really hard to figure out. I feel like there is some ineffable mystery here of what the experience would be like. Because even you mentioned, like, God is being described in very human terms. He's got a hand, he's got a back, he's got a face. Right? And so until Jesus shows up in human flesh, none of that is literally true, right? Like, God is a spirit, and so he doesn't have those physical body parts, right? And so whatever is being experienced here is some form of accommodation to human senses and experience, and yet beyond it. And so there like, sometimes we like think through and figure it all out. This is one of those ones where it's like, it's hard to get down to the actual, like, what would it be there? What would it be like to be there? For meditation, you could put yourself in the story and imagine, but it's a hard one to imagine. You know what I mean? Like, it's a beyond kind of experience. So I just find it fascinating. You know what I mean? It really I hit my head against the wall in the best way on this one. You know what I mean? Like,
and this is why I hope there's like instant replay VR in heaven
Totally.
for all of Scripture.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
like,
That'd be
you go to a certain place, you get to live out some of these moments because I would love to just. What was that like? I want to live that out. No, but I do. You mentioned Jesus. One of the things that struck me was verse 20. So but you cannot see my face, for no one who may see me, for no one may see me and live.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about like holding this in tension with Jesus, who was welcoming little children to like come and be with him and play with him and be near him, and everyone was it's like this is the same God. Like it's both and I think maybe for some it'd be tough to like reconcile that, but to me I think there's like beauty in this, that there is like a majesty, a power, a glory about this God, and there's also an accessibility and a love and a personal side to the same God.
In John 1, it's actually, this passage is kind of referred to in John 1. It's talking about Jesus was the Word, right? Like he existed before all time, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And it says, no one has ever seen God, but he's made him known to us, right? Like, and so there's this tension, and you run into it all the time in the Bible, where it's like seeing God really is kind of the end goal of the whole deal, and yet no one can, and yet he keeps revealing himself. And there's this like, can you see God or can't you see God? Is he going to show himself or is he hidden? And how does this work? And that there's something incredible about that. And then when you think in John 1, it says Jesus tabernacled among us. He became like the tabernacle. So Moses is about to build this tent, and it's like, how will the God of the universe, who cannot be seen and we cannot be in his presence and live, how will he actually stay with us? Well, he's going to use this means of this tabernacle. And Jesus shows up and says, well, that's how I'm doing it, right? So that I can welcome the little kid, and that little kid does what only Moses and the priests got to do, which is come actually into the presence of the God who would kill you if in this scenario. So like, there's just something amazing, and that's us, right? Like, we get to do that.
Yeah,
unreal. What else do you see in here?
Verse 18. Now show me your glory. What a request. Like you think like Moses, you already got the presence of God, you already got the rest, and it's sort of like when you're giving ice cream to your kids and they go, just one more scoop, just one. It's like, I've already given you a whole bowl, like just one more scoop of ice cream or whatever, like it felt a little audacious of Moses to ask for this, but truly, like, God seems so pleased with him. It just I don't know, it really rocked me to think like, wow, if God's glory is that important to Moses, like God's glory should be the ultimate goal. Like if we can see, if we can experience, if God can receive more glory, isn't that the ultimate goal of where we're headed? Like he's like, I've got the presence, I've got the rest, but oh God, your glory, like I just need more of that.
Yeah. There's philosophers and theologians, they like to talk about things that you desire for themselves and things that you desire as a means to something else, right? Like and both are appropriate. You just need to know which kind of thing you're talking about. Like you work not just for the sake of the work, but for the sake of what you're making, what you're earning, those sorts of things, right? But with people, the goal is to say, I'm spending time with you because that's the goal, right? Like you are the point, right? This is the ultimate version of that. It's like, what is all the rest of it for, right? Like all of like setting you free from Egypt. What is all of the, making of the covenant? What is all of the keeping of the law? What is all of the life that God has given for his people to do? All of the things we're doing are important and matter, but they all are for something. And this is really what it's for. It's like encountering God's glory. There is nothing, you don't like see God's glory so that it equips you for something else, right? Like it is the thing. It is the end goal. To see God is the purpose of it all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is something about Moses saying, okay, I just need the real stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I'm going to make one last observation, and maybe if there's anything else, but then we can move on to the next parts. This is just an explanation for those of you who have ever sung the hymn Rock of Ages. Okay, occasionally we sing it around here. It has this line, Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. And it is a very obscure reference if you don't know this story. So I have sung it and I've thought, I wonder if people around me have read Exodus recently enough.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Courtney gets it because she
Yes.
whatever. But it's
cool.
It's like what is going on here? It's the idea that Jesus, like, okay, Moses might have been real confident saying, God, you're pleased with me. Let me see your glory. I think that was gutsy. But for me and for most of us to just say, all right, God, I would like to be in your presence. It's like, well, look, even me, my goodness passing by is going to kill you. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
So how can you actually stand in the presence of God? You need God to put you someplace where you're going to be protected in your current state. And that's Jesus. That we actually can be in the presence of God because we've been hidden in Jesus, and His holiness, His righteousness, who He is enough for us to be in God's presence. That's the point of that hymn, and it's incredible. All right, let's move on to the M's and comma. Let's talk about meditation first, okay? I actually think that the best way to meditate on this passage would be to go slowly read it through and put yourself in the situation as best you can. Imagine what it'd be like to be there. Ask God to help you experience some of this. That would be the best. We've only got 45 seconds, so that's one I'm going to recommend that you do after the podcast. But instead, I'm going to read verse 19, and let's just prayerfully ponder this for the next 45 seconds. The Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. All right, let's talk about the other M and comma. Let's talk about message. What's your message from this?
Yeah, my message was that God's presence will distinguish His people. It's just from that question that Moses asks that says, what else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth? And just the idea that God's presence is the thing that will distinguish His people was my message.
Very cool. My message is that God's glory is more than enough. It is everything.
Mine is from a part that we didn't talk too much about in observations. It's that phrase actually in the verse that we read for meditation. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. I was thinking about that in light of the situation here with they've had the golden calf. They're in trouble, and God has essentially said, no, you don't deserve for me to come with you, but I'm going to anyway. So this is His example of mercy on someone who doesn't deserve it. And because of that, my message is this: there is no obligation for God to be merciful, but there is no limit on God's mercy. So there's no reason for them to think God should do this, and yet nothing keeps Him from being merciful and compassionate. He's going to be compassionate on who He'll be compassionate on. All right, let's talk about the A and comma application. What do you do in response to all this?
Yeah, my message was God's presence will distinguish His people. And that idea of God's presence is something that I've been thinking through a lot lately. And I've been trying to every day think through and actually write down where have I felt or witnessed God's presence and where have I missed it? And I will say the first question, generally, you feel pretty good. Like, oh, yeah, okay, this is where I witnessed God's presence today. This is where I saw it, and where maybe it was distinguishing of His people or the experience I was in. But man, when you answer that question of where have I missed it, you go back through your day and you think, man, what did I need to do? Where did I need to slow down? Where did I need to stop and say, God, show me. Show me right now in this space. I think we go into certain spaces expecting to see the presence of God. I hope you go into every Sunday at church expecting to in some way, commune with God. But I think there are times in our lives when we miss God's presence because we're rushing through, or we don't think it's there, or it's an unexpected place. And what if we walked into the day thinking, okay, show me your glory. Show me your presence today. Where is your presence in this day, in this place? And so for me to ask those two questions at the end of every day has really been an exercise in kind of honing my skill to know that God's presence, practicing his presence in every moment, that idea of just where have I felt it or witnessed it, and how have I allowed myself to do that? And then where did I rush through it? Where did I miss it? And where did I not stop and appreciate it?
It's good.
So my message was God's glory is more than enough. It is everything. So my application is to live in such a way that God's glory is the ultimate goal. So looking at Moses in this whole experience, it felt like ultimately Moses just wanted to experience God's glory. Like at the end of it, it was, man, if God gets greater glory from this, if I can experience God's glory, that's the end goal. And I just thought, man, that's really beautiful. And I wish I would think more about God's glory than I typically do on a daily basis. Similar to the presence, because there's no God's presence without his glory. But I was just thinking, our culture feeds this whole idea that my life is about me. It's like my social media feed, my TV shows, it's in our DNA. Like everything is just very much about me. So I'm trying to learn to stop asking the question of what do I want? What do I prefer? And ask instead what brings God greater glory. I also feel like I kind of cheated because I was at a conference with our young adults this past week, and Louis Giglio preached on this passage.
Oh man.
And God's glory. So that I was getting ready, I was like, this just feels unfair, but also felt like God is trying to speak something to me. But he had a great moment that I'm just going to give him credit for. He shared that in a world where we argue and have preferences, when we walk into church about the color of the church carpet or the song choices in worship or the length of the sermon or who was or wasn't singing that day, how busy the parking lot was, he said, what if we stopped asking when we leave, oh, did I like that? Did I enjoy that? And instead leave asking, do we think God enjoyed that? Did it give him glory? Do you think he was, his glory was even greater because of that experience? And I started to imagine how that would change so much of me. I won't even put it on anybody, but for my own heart, if God's glory was always the ultimate goal, similar to how Moses had it as his ultimate goal in this passage.
Yeah, it's good. So my message was that there is no obligation for God to be merciful, but there is no limit on God's mercy. And because of that, my application is this: don't presume and don't despair. So there's kind of two sides of this. God is not under obligation to show mercy to anybody. And so that means that when I sin and I go to God, I cannot presume. There is something that happens sometimes for people when they're like, look, I know that, God is forgiving and God is gracious and so on. And so, in some ways they're cavalier with their sin, or they just assume it should be easy to sort of, pick up the pieces and move on. And, God just kind of, comes through, and I've trashed the place, but he comes in and cleans up after us. And there's a presumption to that, which is not the kind of relationship you have. Even with a merciful God, you don't go in saying, well, it's just perfunctory. I'm going to, confess, you're going to forgive, and it's all taken care of, right? There is a sense of, no, this is weighty. And it's only because you are the sort of God who has compassion on whom you will have compassion that I can even ask for this. And yet you don't despair. That's the thing. The other side of the coin, some people get really presumptuous. They're like, whatever, God's going to cover it. Other people feel completely crushed. And there are times when you say, I feel like I have messed up. Maybe I've done something that I wish I hadn't done, and I've done. This is the millionth time I've done it. Or you suddenly look in the mirror and you just feel like I'm not the person I'm supposed to be. Or look at the damage that's done to someone, or whatever. And it's easy to feel like there's no coming back from this. Or I really have to put in some time before God is going to be good with me, right? And so to look at this and say, no, don't despair. Don't think that you're going to have to somehow go before God and convince him somehow to want to be compassionate. We're talking about the folks who they were worshiping the golden calf. They're cheating on their spouse on their wedding night, and And God is compassionate even there. And so there's no despair that something you have done or I have done is suddenly going to be too big for God in his mercy and his compassion. And so it's not presumptuous, but it's also not despairing. That's the mercy of God.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Join us again next Monday for a new episode where we'll be looking at another passage from the Bible Savvy reading schedule. And in the meantime, if you're not following along with the reading plan, check out BibleSavvy.com. Also, you can subscribe and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Email us your questions or suggestions at podcast@BibleSavvy.com. Lastly, tell your friends, and we'll talk to you next week.